Hello, my name is Rochelle Schmidt, and I am the Artistic Associate and Idea Manager at Portland Center Stage at the Armory. On behalf of the Idea team, I would like to thank you and welcome you to our panel discussion, Productive Discomfort, Transgender, Non-Binary, Two-Spirit, and Indigiqueer Artists in Portland Theater. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment and to say that we at Portland Center Stage acknowledge that the Portland metropolitan area rests on the traditional village sites and summer encampments of the numerous tribes who made their home along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Today, Portland's diverse and vibrant Native communities are 70,000 strong, descended from more than 380 tribes, both local and distant. We take this opportunity to offer respectful recognition to the many people of the river and their summer guests, and to the Native communities in our region today, the Oregon tribes, and those who have stewarded the land throughout generations. The PCS Idea team is a cross-departmental team whose goal is to dismantle racism and oppression within our communities. To that end, we've created the PCS Idea Guidelines, which you can find on our webpage at pcs.org/idea. We are responsible for accountability to those guidelines and for creating learning opportunities like this one. We are so excited to be able to bring this panel to you, and we're grateful for the amazing theater makers who are taking part in this very important discussion. This panel will be moderated by James R. Dixon. James is a Portland-based actor, director, SDC, playwright, and intersectional equity facilitator. James most recently served as the EDI chair for the PATA Board of Directors and is a current member of the Accountability Collective. There is a wealth of self-empowerment, wisdom, and fulfillment in telling our own stories. So James now focuses on creating through an equity lens in an effort to bring communities closer to stories that display the beauty of the human condition. James is also a member of the Fuse Theatre Ensemble and producing artistic director for BlaQ OUT, a theatrical producing engine that nurtures and incubates the work of artists at the Black queer intersection, premiering this month with Outright 2021. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to James.
Thanks, Rochelle. Quite the intro, man. I was just like, oh, that sounds amazing. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got some amazing humans in this space today to converse and discuss a very important topic. Today we have Jane Comer, Trent Eccles, Zeloszelos Marchandt, and Logan Ridenour-Starnes. Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome if we can just go around and if you could just maybe introduce yourself to folks who are listening and just what you do and how you got into what you're doing. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first, or should I pick?
I'll volunteer first.
Okay,
usually keeping waiting for everyone else to go, so I'll go. I'm Zelos, as James said. I'm the artistic director of Tin Tiny Talks, an artist in residency that's focusing on Black and Indigenous, trans, queer, gender non-conforming art here. It's global, but based in the Pacific Northwest, and it's really exciting. It features 10 artists every year that we uplift and help connect to greater opportunities to make careers in the creative world. I'm also the director of TNA Grand Theater, which opens in 2022 and is focusing on much the same thing. And like my associates here, we're super busy just performing and making lots of different forms of art and keeping it real.
Yes. Who would like to go next? How about Logan?
Yeah. Hi, y'all. I'm Logan Ridenour-Starnes. I use all pronouns. I am a theater maker, knowledge sharer, artist, and activist in the Portland area. I'm currently a grad student finishing a thesis this summer, which I'm so ready to be done with. And yeah, I just kind of letting things emerge around town and stuff as they do. So yeah.
Thank you, Logan. Trent, would you like to go next?
Sure. Trent Eccles. I use they, them pronouns. I'm primarily a theatrical electrician. but I've done almost everything. I was a baby actor, not as a baby, but a small actor, forever ago, and then figured out that I terrified of talking in front of people. So headed backstage. I've done sound and costumes and built sets, but have settled into lighting pretty comfortably. I've worked at a few places around town: Artist Rep, Coho, Third Rail, Northwest Children's Theater, but I'm primarily at Portland Center Stage now as their main stage master, electrician, and programmer. Yeah.
That's
Those
so
things.
awesome. I think that's awesome. I remember the last time I was in a sound booth and I just didn't know what was going on. So we're always thankful to have folks that are so talented. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
Jane.
Yes, I'm Jane Comer. I've been part of the Portland theater scene since 1985. I keep checking that to make certain that's right, and I guess it is, but I've been around a long time. I'm presently the president of the board of Fuse Theatre Ensemble, as well as being an ensemble member. I'm also on the executive board of the Portland Area Theater Alliance, and I'm a multi-hyphenate as well. I'm a playwright, actor, director, whatever job needs to be done, I can do it. I'm once again happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Jane. I love everything. I love that you're on the paddle board. Jane and I work a lot together with Fuse Ensemble, and it's always great to hear you when we're in these meetings, and you bring so much wisdom to these discussions, and I'm just so grateful to have you with us today. Thank you so much. So I would like to start by just taking a moment to think about the past year that we've had. You know, I think many of the folks in this room can say that with COVID and everything that's been happening politically, for myself being a Black identified artist, with what happened with George Floyd, the whole world has changed. And not only has the world changed, the way we communicate with each other has changed, the way we create, the way we make theater has changed. So I'm curious to know what's happened for you all in the past year. Where do you think we are right now with the work that you're doing and where you see the arts headed? And we can go in any order you want. You can just kind of chime in if you want to jump into that.
I don't even know where to start with that.
I know.
Can you narrow it down? Can you pick one of those things? I'm just kidding. I mean, I guess I'll break the ice. I'm sure everyone's got lots to say about this. I mean, speaking just for myself, there's just been such a long history of forcible rewriting or trying to erase the fact alone that like Black Indigenous people are here. And then you add that gender intersection to it. And that just culminates in a lot of feelings for me, especially, living in a world where it's like I'm looking at most of the people here on this continent as guests, and like the wisdom that we have in a queer community, and I use that term as an umbrella term, a lot of that has come from Black and Indigenous people. So as we're raising each other up as trans and indigiqueer and DNC and there's the whole spectrum, I'm at a place now where I feel like a lot of the conversations I've been having lately have involved how we can be better to each other in our own communities, because there's still a lot of equity to be done inside our communities and understanding each other, so that we can better then go forth to those who are not in our community, and perhaps get them to imagine how much better it is to have us all together at the table collaborating. For me, that's really what fueled the work that I am doing right now with TNA Grand and Tin Tiny Talks. It's something I always wanted to do, and it just never seemed like the right time. But with a life where you're always fighting and having to flex and defend yourself and scrap and speak a lot of different languages, a lot of different code with the pandemic, I was like, what do I have to lose? Life same business, different day, you know, like, all right, how many times am I going to have my life threatened to where it's going to be like the right time? And I really just reached a point for myself where I was like, I don't even care. Like, take me to Wishabitch Woods because I just bought some property there and I'm building a log cabin and I'm like living here, you know, like what else, you know, like you know, so I got, you know, through all this, just like, of course, like a pandemic. I frankly just knew it was going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen so soon. So those are my thoughts on where we're at. And for Oregon specifically, it's super late. What the work that's amazing what's going on now with BlaQ OUT and Tintani Talks and all of us here creating stuff, but it is so late, and I still feel like there's a lot of reparations to be made for all the excuses we've all been given, regardless of the color of our skin tone and our heritage. But I'm here for this joy. But those are my thoughts on what the last year has brought me. I still feel like that hustle game is real because I know very well that humans have a tendency to just want to ostrich and bury their head in the sand. And so I'm writing the work that I'm doing right now and lifting up as many, strengthening our network as much as possible. Because history just shows people just can get complacent. I hope that that's not the case, because we still have a lot of pushes to do in this land. But yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I remember after the protests, and no offense to anyone who's watching, but a lot of people reached out. Hey, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. I'm like, first of all, let me catch my breath. Second of all, everyone's messaging me. Third of all, there's resistance and rest. There's resistance. There's so many different forms of resistance. So I'm really thankful for a lot of the changes that have come about, and I feel like I'm just now starting to catch my bearings, even working on BlaQ OUT. I'm like, okay, it's happening. Do I want to be a leader? I think many of us in the room can attest to, like, I didn't seek out to be a leader. It just kind of is thrust upon you, and the time is now, like you were saying. Anyone else have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump a little bit onto what Zeloszelos was saying in terms of, like, I really feel like I've been like stepping into my power since, because there's kind of been a like that, like, well, if not now, when kind of feeling from this last year, just with everything, and just like I would say like a really big like feeling of transformation. I mentioned that I'm writing my thesis earlier, and I'll probably say it again just because it's the thing that's in my brain right now. But I really kind of am thankful for the opportunity to write a thesis. First of all, because it is a privilege to be able to like just sit in this room and just like type away on a computer about like historical stuff that happened long ago and tying it to now. But I really think that like this past year helped me solidify theater, all art, but really specifically like theater and embodied art as empathetic co-creations of events, in which like what is the dialogue that we're having directly with audiences, and how are audiences also performers in a way of like what is the relationality of us with our audiences. And so thesis, and also this past year I went through the Institute for Contemporary Performance, which is Portland Experimental Theater Ensemble's like lab, but also Institute for Contemporary Performance. And so I got to, really like make during the pandemic, like projects, and I was prompted and all of that stuff. So that was like really great to have the opportunity to explore and form in this time, because like it has been incredibly exhausting, but at the same time rewarding to have so many restrictions placed on the art itself, and like on the ability to directly connect with people, which I think is something that even now still like over Zoom sometimes can be a difficult thing to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, just like a lot of stuff this past year about like art as community care and about art as a way for community healing and empowerment is really the, like, I kind of in grad school have been doing like these questions of like, oh, what type of theater artist am I? And like all those like, you know, artist questions of like, who am I and why, who am I to make this as well? Like, who am I to make these things? And really kind of like solidifying for myself the pull and like not shying away from the pull, and to like that stepping into my power of like not necessarily allowing myself to distrust myself and actually like trust myself in the things that I'm doing. That was a lot, but yes, this entire year just has allowed me to force myself to trust myself.
Oh, a lot is welcome here. You can all speak as much as you want. I'm here for it. Jane, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, the fact that we are talking about gender issues is a great sign of progress as far as I'm concerned. I can remember a time where that was never discussed. And I think when you're seen as something that's not part of what they consider the mainstream, when you're considered, when you're a minority of some type, well, you have doors shut to you that you can't go through. Everybody else has an easy time. They just walk through all these doors without any issues, but you get used to having certain doors closed to you. And that's not a good thing, but sometimes bad things like that turn out to be blessings in that you learn to find alternates. You learn to find other, if the door is locked, find a window to crawl through. You find a way to get to where you need to go. It's just a part of surviving. And the one thing about the pandemic is a lot of people who aren't used to having doors closed to them have had to learn that process, have had to learn that, well, maybe what we've been doing isn't the right way. Maybe we should look at some alternate doors, some alternate ways of doing things that might actually be better than what we've been doing. But, things have been so smooth, they haven't even had any reason in their own minds to slow down and figure out, if this is really the right way to do it or not.
I love that. Trent.
Yeah, Jane, I love how I loved how you used the doors with what you said. That's I found myself finding some new doors to push through. I hadn't really thought about it before, but when the pandemic hit, I all of a sudden discovered how insulated my experience had been at primarily at PCS with the community I had made there, with the friends I had made there, because I could just walk into work and people used my correct name and people used my pronouns, and when outsiders didn't, either or guests or other technicians or overhire or whoever, there was always someone that would pop up and be like, that's actually, let me tell you something. And it was like family. And then apocalypse times, and that I had not realized how much I had just counted on that, and I feel a little embarrassed to say this, took it for granted, really, and didn't realize how much others had been helping me stand up, and helping me open those doors to things that I wasn't able to do myself. And so for several weeks, I just sort of was in shock. I'm sure a lot of people were, for a variety of reasons. But I got sick of sitting on the couch and watching all of the crap happen, and you know, started pushing open some things myself. Not letting strangers misgender me, or not letting those acquaintances that knew me by a different name, and it's fine because whatever, and it's easier, and I don't want to correct that. And also coming up to other people's and like, hey, that's not their pronouns. That they actually go by a different name. And finding that I was able to do that too. I didn't just have to sit by and let those things happen because it was easier. Yeah.
I love that. I often find myself in these rooms, mostly with mostly white people talking about race, and it's like, well, what can I do? I was like, there's always more work to be done. You know, no matter how educated I am on equity, there's always more work for me to do, and there's always more work for other folks to do. So like as heightened as everything is right now with race, and as much as we're talking about gender, I'm ultimately hoping that this isn't some capsule in time. I think everyone in this space can understand the urgency in that. Like, is it, you know, how do we keep this conversation, keep the flame going on this conversation for as long forever, until we get everybody up to speed and we start making some systemic change. With that being said, with all of the changes that's happening right now, do you feel, I mean, obviously some of us are underrepresented. What voices are being left out of these discussions as far as theater makers? What conversations aren't happening at the table that need to be happening right now? That's a big question.
Yeah, it's a really big question.
Zelos and I talk quite a bit.
I'm pulling my hair out just as you're asking it, right? I'm trying to be cool, but I'm like, I don't know.
You can start anywhere. You can say anything
I'll get
you want.
My thesis. Just distribute that amongst Portland Center Stages listeners and audience members. But oh, I don't know. I think once my sentiment, my feeling is like, isn't it obvious? Like, I feel like that's just like, I get this is a safe question you're asking, but I'm also just like, duh, about who's being left out here. I foresee a lot of challenges in the next few years for sure. America, the idea of it is born of a culture of passive aggressiveness, overt murder and genocide, rape, and shoving things under a rug, and that is poisonous not only to those who are not white, but incredibly disingenuous to those who are and where those who are white come from. There's in my mind, several clear points in human history, which is still not very long, where, you know, you could take it back to the UK and the Britons and the Romans, you know, wanting to conquer everything. And in that time period, since we're talking about theater and music and art and all of that, you know, places like France and Spain were not considered white like we talk about them today. They had a whole different language, even in terms of like religion and spirituality. And it was through this conquering that this idea of whiteness was created. So not, you know, to talk about who's being left out is to me just such a really huge question, because as I see it myself as a working artist and a director and a producer and a mentor and a million other things, in my daily life, and James, you and I do talk about this on the regular, you know, I see it as like, all right, well, yes, you know, somebody like me is being left out, somebody like Logan, somebody like Jane and Trent and you know, and certainly for me, like I'm all about Black and Indigenous joy to the front. I really had my fill of working with them purely white programs or any of that. It bores me to tears. I'm not interested in it. It's done. It's tired unless the people in these fields want to collaborate or, you know, really realize, you know, really get to the meat of human experience and include the vast array of us that are around them, then I just really don't care. And I'm very frank about that. But I say that from a place of also just like love, because I'm like, if you value yourself enough, you know, even as a white person, then you'll see that you have a heritage that traces back to somewhere, and you have a responsibility to speak to that separate from this white idea of who you are. And until that happens, then there's going to be really unnecessary hard conversations. There's already hard conversations that have to happen because people can see Bigfoot, but asking them to point out racism and gender and trans intersections, it's like gender intersections, it's like pulling teeth. So who are we leaving out? Obviously, Indigenous people, Black people. What are we leaving out is what I'm hoping more people ask, because I feel like that's a much more pointed question that allows us to answer the first for a previous question easier. We're leaving out joy because I'm not here for pain pornography, and that's something that is really hard for the art world, people overall, to wrap their heads around. They're so used to us, in the words of Baldwin, of us as a fixed star, and I think we can draw an allusion to that regardless of race. We're just going to talk about gender stuff, where if we move our position, people get really, really upset or act like, you know, we can't, it doesn't apply to anything. But it's because I think deep down inside it rings true, and they want to sweep that under the rug because it leads to a million other questions. So, and joy above all is what frightens people the most about us. They don't understand it, because to them it's coming from a culture of pain, like I was speaking of, a culture of conquest and pain and erasureship of other people and erasureship of the self. So, you know, that's a long road and a big ask to ask of a country that has so many other experiences with that, to reckon with that and welcome joy. That said, you know, there's I call it a renaissance of joy, but I don't think the Portland metropolitan area in Oregon overall has experienced what's happening right here. And I really sit with it every night and go, this is really fabulous. This is really momentous and historical. Like, I've never been able to just even, you know, like Mickey Gillette over at, you know, was writing a play, and I've been talking with her and Bobby Vermeer over the spring, you know, about that. Never, ever growing up would I just be able to go to a trans sibling and just be like, you know, and be talking about this stuff. You know, we're developing plays, we're talking with each other, we're in this room together, you know, linking up, you know, so that is, you know, for all the ills that I think the Pacific Northwest has, and there's 100 million of them, I think this is really cool. You know, we've got our own version of gay Harlem happening right now. So that's cool.
I just
be here for that.
I just want to touch in really quick, just for, you know, and as I ask these questions, I just want you all to know I know the answers to these questions. Okay.
I know you too.
But we all know why we're here. Like,
there.
let's be frank, you know, like, and not to pick on Portland Center Stage. I worked there for 5 years. We know what the audience looks like at Portland Center Stage. We know what the makeup of the board is and what's happened with staffing over the years. And there are a lot of changes happening at Portland Center Stage. And just having this conversation would not have happened years ago. You know what I mean? So we're, you know, this is a grand opportunity for folks to say, oh, I didn't, you know, segue. I did a documentary with Zelos and some other folks, and I ended up showing it at a trauma workshop that I was working on. And someone walked up and they said, oh, I didn't realize there was, you know, bias in the queer community. And that I was like, you know, there's so much people don't know that we're going through, and that folks are going through. And you can learn a lot when you just listen to folks. Does anyone else have any comments on this particular topic?
I just wanted to add, it's just that I had a sentence formulated, and now it's just in the ether. So
Bringing it back. We're bringing it back.
Yeah, just trying to bring it back. yeah, that I think it literally, again, just to Zelos's something that Zelos said about the finding the joy in work, because I'm just so tired. I'm so tired, and I know we all are, but like I'm so tired of the trauma porn and of not finding the light and finding the joy. And that's not to say that it can't, because you have to have both, I think, but really finding like a thing that I have run into in the Portland area, and I've been here for like roughly 5-ish years, and I did like move out, not really knowing what I was going to do, and then I ended up being catering manager at Portland Center Stage, and then I was like, well, I'm in theater again, it must be a sign, and then jumped back into theater. I had originally come here to go to culinary school, totally different path, but just like something that I have noticed folks talking about more, and just like something that kind of sparks me right now is like the turning of this venom, the kind of like venom into nectar, into the joy, and like kind of really it's just invigorating to even see conversations about it, because like when I first started, or like first got here in the Portland area, it was a very different world, and it's just, yeah, it's invigorating to see the shift.
I want to throw another question in the mix. We can still, Trent and Jane can still comment on this, but I just want to throw another one in the mix. From all of your perspective, what does true arts leadership look like now, and what are your hopes for the future? And I ask this question because if you look at the makeup of this room, we've got arts administrators, we've got technicians. Jane, you're on a board. Zelos and I are arts leaders. We're producers. We don't see many folks that look like us and live the lives that we live in these positions. And so, and it's great that we're doing it, but how do we duplicate that? What does arts leadership look like? I just want to throw that in the mix if anybody wants to add in on that as well.
I'll jump in because I have strong feelings about systems in general, of course, but very particularly like power systems and the way that we set up power in organizations, and also share or not share power in organizations. I just like arts leadership, to me, always is on that strive for as much equity as possible. And like, that's not to say that, and like, of course, responsibility comes with that. And that's not to say that like anyone should do anything. Because if you don't know how to do a thing, it's great to learn and grow to figure out how to do the thing. But if you need help, ask for help. Yes. So hierarchy things. Yeah, I think like just recognizing that the thing and the thing could be an organization, could be a project, it could be anything really, but in order to like make a thing, you have to listen to the other people who are in the room. You have to share relationality with the other people in the room in a way that sees them as multifaceted humans. And I feel like this was something that I think, James, you said like months ago about like this kind of like new wave of directors, or like someone saying, like mentioning or like expressing that
you're
like
one of the new school directors.
You're directors. Yeah. You care about your collaborators and your performers. Yeah. And I just remember you saying that and going, oh, I'm one of those new school directors too. So like that really, that level of care, I think, in arts leadership is really important. Yeah, that level of care and that like level of care to self as well, and like acknowledging within self when like you do something that is not good, or if someone is like coming to you to talk about a thing that you have done, like actually acknowledging like, hey, I'm a flawed human like everyone else. Let's have a conversation about it, and then let me like change my behavior so we actually start shifting the things that we want to shift. So yeah, that I would say that would be a great arts leader to me.
Trent and Jane, I haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have any comments?
I like that you've added this question because it helps answering the other one for me a little easier. I think I am starting to see and really want to see at all / more of is arts leaders who embrace fearlessness, because what Zelos was saying about lacking or missing that joy, it's because of the fear, and a lot of people hold power because other people hold fear, and it's a tool that gets used over and over again in many different ways, and I've experienced it as having people added to the conversation about X, Y, or Z because someone in power is afraid of how it will look if they don't. But when it seems like when it comes from that, including people into a conversation when it comes from fear is cosmetic. And you don't get to hear those. You don't actually get to hear those voices. It's a placeholder. I cringe at using this word, but those people become tokens.
That's a great word. I don't know why we cringe to that, because
it's the word. That's where
I cringe because it's such a thing that happens that it is gross to watch happen. That I think that's why I cringe at it. But when you include someone because you're afraid of them, it's a token gesture, and it's not because you want to hear them. It's not because you care about them or what they have to say. It's because of you're afraid of what they'll do if you don't let them sit in that chair, or you're afraid X, Y, or Z. I'm not a great talker, but seeing more, taking that fear out of the equation and seeing more fearless leaders that invite people to the table, to the conversation, to the party, because they're curious, because they don't know and they want to, and are not afraid to just sit back and let conversations like these happen, even if it means they're uncomfortable or don't know what is going to be said, is great. It's great to be a part of. It's great to see, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see more.
Thank you for saying that. When I started directing, I was like, I don't know if Rusty Tennant gave me my first job for Booty Candy, and I was like, Rusty, I don't know how to do this, and they were like, you'll be fine. So I know what not to do, and I said, and the one question, when people ask a question, when I said the first time I said I don't know, I said I don't know. Oh, that felt good. Do you have an idea? and I became a lover of ideas. Like you invite collaboration, right? So I mean, some of the best work I've ever had is just allowing people in the space to tell us what's on their mind, so we can actually work together and actually remove some of those power systems out of the way. I didn't mean to cut you off. Jane, did you have a comment?
Well, I can always use my own experience. I'm, binary trans. I'm a woman, and I transitioned a couple of decades ago. I worked in Portland theater before I transitioned and was considered a pretty good character performer and got parts in a lot of things. And then I transitioned and people stopped talking to me. They didn't like me auditioning. They rolled their eyes when I showed up. People I spent a lot of time with, a lot of good times with, they just stopped talking to me. And I thought, well, maybe I kind of expected that, that's the price of being me. But, and part of me was relieved because I felt so free and happy for once in my life. But theater had always been my passion. And I thought, well, I can stay close by being an audience member, if nothing else. But even that was kind of restricted. They actually said, we don't feel comfortable with you even sitting in our audience. We don't feel comfortable with you being anywhere near our theater. It's just amazing that this was not that long ago. That's why we've made incredible progress. But I was on the outside looking in. And like I said, I found a way back in theater. I always kept close. I did see a lot of theater. I had to go to different towns to do it, where they didn't know me. And eventually enough people changed around in Portland that most of the people here don't remember me from back then. And I found a way just doing it all myself. I created my own little production company. I created my own solo shows. I, did all of that. And then all of a sudden, companies were talking to me again. And, Fuse, Rusty Tennant once again, and Kate Mura brought me in the Fuse. And because of my experience, I never thought I would be the kind of person that would want to be any kind of an administrator. I just wanted to concentrate on my art. But from that experience, when they offered me things like, being on the Fuse board and then being board president, I knew I couldn't turn that down, whether I really wanted to do it or not, just because I understood the significance of that and how far I and gender nonconforming and gender different people have traveled in just a short amount of time. And I'm amazed I'm being used in that role. But I'm going to do my very best because I know how it hurts. And my leadership is one of inclusion. And a blessing of being a little bit different is you learn to see the world a different way than you might have otherwise seen it. I mean, I am white. I had all this supposed privilege, and but because of all of this, I just see all the beauty in the world that people seem to want to ignore. They just want to sit with people just like them and be with people just like them and have everything what they consider picture perfect. But I don't think that's picture perfect. It's the variety, it's the difference in all people. That's what we should be honoring and celebrating because that's the true beauty. And I feel sorry for people who aren't able to see that and want to go on living in this white on white world or whatever it is they seem to love so much. I just don't get it. And I guess that's a great blessing of my background. And one thing trans people often are asked is, do you have any regrets about being trans? And the answer most people give is, yeah, I regret not transitioning any sooner. And that's true for me. I wanted to transition when I was 4 years old. I'm a classic transsexual, as they used to call it. And that never went away. It was always a part of me. I even knew my name was Jane from the age of 4. But I didn't actually transition for a long time because I loved theater and I thought I'd never be able to work in it again. And I held on, and then I finally transitioned, and there was that regret. Why, now that I know how cool it is just to be yourself and how joyous it is, I should have done it a long time before, but maybe I did it at just the right time. And it puts me right in the right position to make a difference for others. And I just think that's cool. I think there is a change going on, and I hate to be self-congratulatory, but I seem to be a person that's been put in that spot. And I'm hoping I'm not the last one. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to hold the door open for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. I love that visual, holding the door open. I often talk about lateral mentorship, which we'll probably get into here in a little bit. I have a follow-up question now that I've heard you your reply there, Jane. I remember trying to get somebody to produce something Black and queer for years, and I kept getting, oh, audiences, our audiences aren't ready. It's not, now's not the time. Now's not the time. And well, when is the time? What do you? I mean, in your experience, what is your response to that? Like, why is it now the time? When is the time? Why can't people just jump in? TNA Grand is only one entity. 10 Tiny Talks is one entity. Fuse is one entity. Why are audiences so reluctant to allow other folks to tell their stories? I'm curious if you have any ideas.
I've always thought it's something to do with the donors. So much of theater is based on donations and winning grants, and a lot of people live in fear of annoying the donors, who tend to be a rather restricted little bunch of people within a small demographic. And they think they can do incremental things rather than doing any, trying to do something big. We'll just do little things around the corners here, and we'll feel like we're making progress. And that's why this is not the time for this, but we can do this little token thing here. And I would imagine it's the same thing that when you come out and tell people who you are, it's that same bold move that even non-trans and gender non-conforming people have to learn to do. You have to make those bold movements, or you start questioning whether what you're doing is really worth anything at all.
Maybe it's time for new donors.
Yes.
Maybe it's time for new board members.
I don't think it's just, I think the donor equation is an excuse I've heard my whole life. I got started in classical music at the age of 12 and did all the opera companies here and traveled. I think that is a certain type of privileged outlook that the theater, the art world takes overall is, well, what about the donors? And I'm over here saying, you don't think there's middle-class Blacks out here? You don't think there's, that 1%, doesn't have somebody like me in it? Because you're a liar. That's the thing. And I've worked closely with developments inside nonprofits and organizations, and very good at marketing. And I've always just said, just because you don't know anybody Black and rich doesn't mean they're not out there. Just because you don't know anybody Indigenous who has dollars doesn't mean they're not out there. I said, where do you think we get everyone? I would go into meetings and go, how do you know all these people? How do you know this art? How do you know these plays? How do you know any of that? And I said, it's because I'm inside these communities and you are not. And it is a privilege that I would even be talking to you about any of this stuff. But if you make this art, I've always said, guess who's going to show up? That's always how I pitch that. It's always been an excuse. Well, we don't want to offend any donors. And yes, I do agree with Jane to some degree. That is definitely a worry, but it's a very racist, genderist worry that people who want to make excuses say, because I will always say that, jerks know what they're doing. There's that ignorance factor, but every single, I don't know if you can swear. I guess I've already been swearing a little bit.
You can. Yes, you can.
Assholes know what they're doing. They always do. Every single time do they know. Every single time. I'm not going to belittle the intelligence of humankind to pretend otherwise. And they say these things so that they can dig their heels in. So I've always come in, and James has heard me say this a million times. We had many late night talks.
Yes.
How am I going to get this area to wake up? And I said, you gotta talk the money. I said, first of all, say it's of interest to you that you let me make this art, that you help me make this art, because I'm making it whether or not you're involved or not. And as history shows, money ain't the only thing. Like, our communities gave America an identity, period. Period.
And I just want to add really quickly, like, you know, when you pass the check over, the best thing to do is thank you, walk away.
And
walk
away. No, because I've also been in those situations where you know, on the heels of what, you know, Trent was talking about, that like the fear, and what Jane's talking about is also like the caveat, you know. And I've always been clear, like, the contracts I write, I make them write it in. You won't tell my artist how to make art, and you will not tell me how to make art. Give me the check and I will do it, because I found out while watching that's how it works. Like, I've seen so many white donors just hand crazy amounts of, you know, wild amounts of money to white theaters. That would never happen traditionally in our world. If Logan and I came up to some wealthy donor, they literally will wait us out for years and ask a million trillion questions. So I'm grateful to those, you know, that, like, at Fuse and at Jane, who are realizing that, look, it's to everybody's benefit. But that's how I say that. I said, you know, I'm not even here trying to leverage anything or whatever, but what I'm here to say is we'll cut you off also, you know. And I think before the pandemic, people were complaining about how basic white theater and the arts theater world was, right? You know, we were clamping down, going, fine, we won't audition. We don't have to do Showboat. We don't even have to tell you who we're working with. You know, like, it cuts both ways. And that's exactly what was happening. So, like, just remember those days. And that's what kind of started those equity conversations. A lot of us were just like, fine, we won't work with you, and we're not going to tell anybody. And you know what else? We're going to tell everyone to not go over there, because it's not safe, and it's not interesting, and it doesn't pay well, and it's not worth our time. We can make art for each other. We've always done that. We need you like a hole in the head. You know, that's how relationships work, whether it's a business relationship or an interpersonal one. And then we go in there and I say, it's of interest to you. Here's these numbers that you could be tapping into in the Black and Indigenous community globally that you're not getting right now. And the only way you're going to get that is to do the work. And it's going to take time. I can't tell you how many times I get asked to come help a theater or an organization because the Black community, Indigenous community doesn't trust them. And I say, can you blame us? So I said, well, here's what we're going to do. You know, I mean, I have my boundaries too, so that I can keep have the energy to do all the stuff that we all are doing. But I'll just say, this is how it is. There's going to be no caveats. And at any time, if I need to bounce, then I'm going to bounce. If it's a situation where it's not safe and you're not upholding things, then that's that, you know. But I also, like, encourage theater companies to do it right. I want to, like, point out a recent partnership with Profile Theater. They have a community profile series, and we did an arc for Tin Tiny Talks called Community Profile. I worked with AC Ramirez Delriano, and we took a good month and a half. They wanted to rush it, and I was like, you can't rush this stuff. Let's really plan this 4-week intensive around playwriting carefully, because people are going to have so many feelings. There's so many things they've never been able to talk about. Let's do it right. And also, pay the artists who are showcasing. I don't care how new they are. I don't care whether they're emerging, they've never been on a stage, or established. You pay them for the time that they did to create this art. Because also, you never know. They could win that Tony a few years from now. You don't know. So pay them, you know, like, that's what's fair. You would want it, right? So then do it for us then.
That actually leads me into my next question, because when Zelos and I, when we were interviewing the candidates for Tin Tiny Talks, something that consistently happened was this sense of a lack of abundance. So I'm like, hey, what do you want to do? Well, I can do what I want. So yeah, like, not that we're rich, but just pretend money isn't a value and say, tell us what you want to do, right? You know, that lack of abundance, that lack of resources leads into my last question. What, for all of you, what advice do you have for other artists who want to tell their stories or break into this work as creators, technicians, and arts administrators? What advice do you have for folks? I love it when you giggle, because it's like
Ray, really hard. No, I'm just kidding. No, I feel like I've talked a lot already, but
I tell people to say no. Start saying no.
Oh yeah, it's okay to say no,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to rest. Like, I'm really I'm really worried that we're going to forget about all the tools that we learned as artists while we were sojourning the first part of the pandemic. You know, like Zoom, as much as you can get fatigue, there's a lot that you can do, even for rehearsing on Zoom. There's a lot. You don't necessarily need to be in the room for every single thing. And it was also really helpful, I think, for those who had work to do in regards to the equity, inclusion, and intersectionality that we're talking about, because I saw it really save artists like me, you know, from getting into worse situations that we were talking about earlier, where people are just being discriminatory or just not even really putting their money where their mouth is, because there wasn't like a room that we were in. It was a Zoom room. They had to take a time out and think about stuff and talk to people. Whereas in the before times, you know, we would just be like on the stage and having to think faster in the green room or something, or any of that stuff. It allows us to also just take on more projects if we want to, and save a lot of money to do that, which is really important to the Black trans community specifically, and the Indigenous community and all that stuff, you know. And just like the taking time out, how important that is. But I also just hope that in terms of leadership that, again, tying back to something Trent said, it's not just about the fear. I think a lot of people say, I'm not transphobic, I'm not, you know, racist or any of that stuff. They'll put the signs in the windows, and they'll buy our flags and whatever, and they'll donate to this person.
Wear the pins.
Wear the pins or something. But it's the stuff that's in the silence, you know. They'll never, just like Jane experienced, I think almost all of us have transitioned in any sort of, you know, medical way. There's that unfortunate ceremony where no one wants to stand next to you in the club. They'll cry all sorts of things. No one wants to be your friend anymore. No one wants you to be on the job or to get that role or anything like that. And those people are still out there. So it's not even, you know, like they'll down to just like dating stuff where they'll say, oh, I'm not a transphobic person, but they would never ever want to like hang out with us or anything like that, or date or get to know or, you know, collaborate. Those are the things that need to change. And I still see that happening in the theater world with lots of artistic directors just in the Portland metropolitan area. So don't give up, those of you that see through the bullshit, because that is, you know, a beautiful partnership that we need people like that who can cut through that, because a lot of people that, you know, own or trying to own the brand, but deep down they're not really living their lives for anybody but themselves.
Thank you, Zelos. Anyone else have a response for that? What advice do you have? Go ahead, Jane.
I would say never stop working. Never stop working on your craft. Never stop working to improve and to find new things about your art that you love, because eventually you'll get there. Eventually you'll find an opening. Eventually you'll find an opportunity. It may seem pretty dark sometimes, especially, you know, at certain moments where it just seems like everybody has just turned you off and they don't want anything to do with you anymore. But don't stop working. Don't stop loving your art, because your time will come.
Logan, Trent, do you have any comment?
I will. Sorry, Logan. I want to echo that. Don't be afraid to say no sometimes. It took me a long time to learn that lesson, and I did. There was a time where I didn't turn any theater gig in particular down, and even when they made me uncomfortable, even if I was working with people who didn't see me or expected me to be someone I wasn't, or that just assumed I was with them, and I just sort of sat witness to other people being made to feel uncomfortable and do theater or sit in rooms with people doing theater that I didn't want to do, because I had to say yes, because what if there wasn't another piece coming? Or what if I said no to the wrong thing and then I got labeled as blah, blah, blah. And the more I realized, oh, I don't have to work on this show that makes me feel like crap. The more opportunities to do, to work on art that I actually gave a crap about, the more of those I saw, because I wasn't wading through the crap of saying yes to everything that came along. And that was, like I said, that was a long road to learn that lesson. But yeah, I've gotten to work on some great things because I stopped saying yes to like the crap I didn't want to, because I was worried that nothing would come along ever again.
Thank you, Trent. Logan?
Yeah, I mean, I am just gonna reiterate the not being afraid to say no. I think that that's the biggest thing I've learned, even in the past couple of months, of like that those boundaries of self are really important. And the in addition to like, don't be afraid to say no, of like, don't stop seeing and holding and loving yourself as an artist within the work. Also, what else did I write down? Oh yes, speak the truth even if it's uncomfortable. As the title of the productive discomfort, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but it's gonna be productive. So just stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I remember saying in an interview the other few weeks back, one of the notes that I tend to give when I'm directing a show, I tell people to stop apologizing. I say, don't apologize, don't water it down. If they choke on it, let them choke on it. You know what I mean? All of our lives, all of our stories have so much validity to them, and a lot of us are just waiting for the opportunity to tell our own stories. And I really want to touch in on that just before we close out, because I don't want anyone to watch this and think that this is about bashing cisgender people or bashing white people in particular. We're basically saying that out of the people in this room, we don't get a lot of opportunities to do this work, and we need to see more folks that look like us on the boards, as dramaturgs, as technicians, as producers, directors, as playwrights. We just don't get that opportunity. And if you really wanted to be an ally, we're looking for cohorts and co-conspirators. We're looking for family, you know, and a lot of that is knowing when to step in, when to step up, and knowing when to step back. So I challenge people to keep leaning into that, and most important, leaning into that not only with your coworkers and your board members and your donors, but also with your families as well, because people are literally dying out there. Outside of this privileged thing we get to do, making art on the, you know, there's still a lot of people being hurt every day, and not getting an opportunity to just breathe on a daily basis. I'm really happy and so full. It's such a full-time meeting with you all. I'm almost speechless trying to think about it. Like my skin's I'm getting goosebumps thinking about the possibilities. We had our first rehearsal of BlaQ OUT the other day, and there were 7 like just black faces, and I was like, you know, I almost cried, because we don't get opportunities to do that. So I'm looking for more of that, and I'm hoping for more of that for all of you. Before we close out, does anyone have any closing thoughts before we close out for the day? All right. I think we did it. I think we did it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you soon.